Hi there, Jordan checking in before we get to the episode to check in on your holiday season so far. Do you have what you need or could you use a little bit more? Well, one way to make sure you always have what you need is using my friend Spec. The Spec platform enables teams to instantly access and add new applications using real time data, optimize system performance, and replace underperforming tools. Need IDV? They have that ready for you to turn on right now. Need email reputation? Yep, let's go. Very next transaction. What about a full rules engine and device ID? Locked and loaded. What's even better is Spec securely collects rich user session data in real time, enabling continuous and secure threat monitoring without the reliance on tamper-prone JavaScript or tracking tags. When threats are detected, Spec can remediate the issue before the user even leaves the site. Check out www.specprotected today to learn more how they can help you this very holiday season. Now let's get to the episode. Everybody, welcome to another episode of Fraud Boxer. I have a very special guest, someone that I've been admiring for a very long time. He reached out to me actually and was like, let's do this. And that made me very, very, very happy. So Andrew Austin from Carmax, how are you doing on this Veterans Day? And you are a veteran.
I am. Yes, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Jordan.
Yeah, so we talked probably last year, maybe it was even this year before MRC, but we just jumped on a thing briefly. You reached out to me, wanted to meet. So kind of how did we meet? If you could go through your version of the story and let's go from there.
Should have probably thought about this more before we jumped on here.
Yeah, these are conversations. These aren't rehearsals. These are conversations.
I think if I recall, you had made a post on LinkedIn about something about vendors, and it seems like you and I love us some vendors. And I had to actually repeat that mantra to myself before jumping on here. We will not talk about vendors. We will not talk about vendors.
But vendors spend plenty of time talking about themselves, so we don't need to do it for them.
And they spent plenty of time trying to talk to us. And we had both recently made posts about that. And I reached out to you, and I think I offered to write a song with Chat GPT about fraud vendors, and I would sing, and you could play the guitar. And we'd put it out as some special edition content for the podcast.
We need to do this. It's coming back to me now, and I agree we need to do this, especially because I've been in Chat GPT all morning, like I told you. So
exactly, yeah. Maybe if there's time left at the end, we'll do it live.
Perfect. We'll do it live. Yeah. I think I remember that post because it was right before. I think it was right before MRC or right at the end of the year last year, when kind of coming out of COVID, and it was just like 5 or 6 different vendors a day messaging us saying, come see what we got, how we solved it, how we're better. And it's just like, it was a lot. And I think it's because, and there's nothing wrong with salespeople. I understand you got a job to do. And like, I have put out a big sales episode right before MRC last year, but like, it's just a lot to send me a lot of emails, especially when you haven't researched me and then send me that same email every single day. And it's just a lot. Like, it's just a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I had just started a new role at Carmax, and was looking at specifically IDV companies, at the time. And so, I mean, between me reaching out to them and them reaching out to me, it was quite overwhelming. And especially, so that MRC, all the communications there. Yeah, it was,
I would say that this last MRC, like people that got the list, like the vendors that got the attendee list, were especially ambitious.
That's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah, so that, I mean, it's coming back around again. So everybody, get ready, and I'll be reposting that episode that I did with Cambria last year. That kind of goes over how to calm yourself down on those ones. So you have had quite a history. I mean, you are at Carmax now, but let's talk about where you were before, because obviously none of us started in fraud. We all wound up in fraud, but you started in the service, and that I think is a super interesting story. So if you could give us a rundown on your background in the service on this fine Veterans Day, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I joined. Well, let me back up. So the Austin family has been in various forms of service for, I'd say, the past 100 years. my father was in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was in the Navy. My great great grandfather was in the Army. Got uncles in the Marine Corps. I have every branch of service except for the Coast Guard, because as any true veteran knows, the Coast Guard's not really military.
You don't
Which
like riding around in ships?
I say tongue in cheek. I work with a Coast Guard veteran who probably saw more combat activity than I did. But anyway, so I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17. I think I was
Oh,
17 and 2 months when I signed the papers. I had to have, if you're under 18, you have to have your parents sign with you. So my parents signed with me. I went to boot camp between my junior and senior years of high school.
holy.
Yeah. After I graduated, came back, did my advanced training. I started off in tanks, so the M1 Abrams tank. And
Wow.
very soon after that, we transitioned to air defense artillery, which was Stinger missiles. If you ever played Call of Duty, the FIM 92 that you shoot down the helicopters with in some of those missions. That was the missile, but it was mounted on the Avenger weapon system, which is a turret on the back of a Humvee. Not quite as cool as a tank, but you serve to meet the needs of the Army. So
Yeah.
transition to that. So went out to New Mexico, did a 6-week course out there to get certified for that. And then a couple months after that, went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri to be retrained as a military police officer, thinking that I was going to Afghanistan, and ended up in Germany for about a year and a
Because
half.
this was like on our prep before this, like, guys, we had a conversation, but this was during the time that what this was 2003, right? When
Yeah,
you initially
2003
signed
I
up.
joined. Yep.
So that's
So
why you thought you were going, is the invasions of Afghanistan and then Iraq.
yeah,
That was all happening. So that's probably
it
where everybody
was.
thought they were going to wind
And
up.
I
Yeah.
wanted to go. I really wanted to go. That's why I joined. I wanted to serve and keep our country safe. And I think I tried volunteering, but it was like, no, we're going. We don't have to do this. So just go. And we ended up in Germany. So '05, we did a couple months of training, ended up in Germany for a year and a half, working as a police officer on an army base. And came home, tried to go to college for about a year and a half, and then 2010 rolled around, and finally got deployed to Iraq, working a radar system that detected rockets and artillery that they would shoot at our bases. Spent about a year on that, came home again, went back to school while I was still in the
There you
unreserved
go.
status, finished my degree, and I ended up getting out of the Army in 2015. So I did 12 years total in the Army National Guard. There was 4 or 5 years total between school deployments on that was all on active duty. So I just say the Army when people ask me, because you say the Ohio Army National Guard, it's like, what is that? You got to go through this whole thing. So yeah, 12 years in the Army, about 4 or 5 on active duty, and the rest reserve status.
Well, thank you for your service.
My
That's
pleasure.
quite the story there. Um, so you came back, you went to school, you got out of the Army, and then you joined Fifth Third Bank, right? Or was there something in between that?
I joined Fifth Third in 2014, so I was still on reserve status, where I trained,
Okay.
1 weekend a month and 2 weeks out of the summer. I joined after graduating from college, joined in their IT leadership program. So it's a rotational program where you do 4 6-month rotations in different areas. And I did one in project management when I first started. What was I working on? Like a credit card project and a reporting project. And it was like, this is terrible. And my second one, it told me I was going to the AML team. And I thought, oh, cool. What does that acronym stand for? And found out anti-money laundering. And I was like, this is kind of interesting. And once I got in there, it just really kind of clicked with me. The military is very structured, very regulated, and
Yeah.
going into a bank in AML is very structured, very regulated. So it was around the time when FinCEN had put out an advance notice about KYC, CDD, and requiring that to be part of the bank's AML program. So started working on not a proof of concept, an RFP to look at different vendors of how we were going to
Yeah.
implement a KYC program there. So it was really cool. I got to run the program to talk to all the different systems that would be feeding us data and say what changes do we need to make to onboarding to collect the right information from people. And ran that for the entire 6 months that I was there. Moved on to a couple different roles, and then I actually tried to stay in that role. I said, "Let me out of the program. I'm
Oh,
just
you
going to stay and
liked
run
it,
this."
huh?
Yeah, yeah, I was going to stay and run it, but that didn't work out. So I finished the program, and a year later came back, and I stayed there for another four or so years. So we finished out that KYC program, and then moved right into replacing the bank's AML transaction monitoring platform. So anyone in banking that is listening to this will know how difficult that is. So that, I mean, from start to finish, that was a 3.5 year long program.
Jesus, yeah.
And you're talking every customer, every account, every transaction that flows through, top, I don't know what they are now, but at the time around a top 15 US bank. It's a massive amount of systems and data that have to be, consolidated into one application. So it was a great learning experience. But by the time we got done with that, I was thinking, what am I going to do next? And Fifth Third made that easy for me by laying me off.
Well, they're
So,
like, here you go.
I mean,
We hear we hear in our minds you've been thinking.
yeah,
So
yeah,
here we'll make the decision for you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, it was devastating, honestly, because it was like, oh
Yeah.
man, you kind of built my brand around around AML, and being the guy that's doing all these programs and systems standing up and being laid off. It was just kind of stripped away from me. And at the time, like I said, it was devastating, but career wise, it's the best thing that could have possibly happened for me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
moved on to, go ahead.
I've I mean, yeah, just like to say that, like, I've been in that space before. So I've not in the AML space, but in the layoff space.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's some AML that comes into all of our businesses, like, making sure that we're not selling to countries or individuals that are on the
sure.
banned list, all that. We usually just buy products.
I've heard of
Venture.
OFAC once or twice.
Yeah, every once in a while, yeah. But I mean, I think in marketplaces too have to have a lot of AML compliance, because you need to know who you're paying out these things to. So make sure you're not funding terrorism, all those fun
Right.
things. I think a lot of marketplaces probably fall short on a lot of that, but are getting away
Quite
with
possibly.
it. But hopefully, as it becomes more the technology becomes a little more accessible, people will get better. But that's being said, this is the third version of my life that I have had. Doing fraud and payments. I've been laid off where I had thought, like, I had spent a number of years in this particular field. Like, I was a buyer for a chain of retail stores. I thought, this is my life. I'm going to be a buyer. I'm going to be like doing merchandising for the rest of my lives, and then that decision changed when I discovered technology, and I got a job in technology, but then got laid off there. So everything changed right away, then, obviously with getting laid, I thought I have my skateboard company I've talked about in another episode, when that when the economy burned up, that didn't work anymore. But even in this industry, like when I moved to the Bay Area and was working at Gift, once we got purchased by First Data, they laid us all off after the
Right.
1 year it was over.
Right.
And that was the same thing. It's like, I've built my brand my whole life now. Like, this third cocoon of me that I've hatched from has now been fraud prevention. What do I do? And I had a huge identity crisis about that, and it took a little while to get back in. It took me over a month. Thankfully, I was able to do some consulting work to get me to carry me through. But it was scary. It was terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this happened for me. This happened at the height of COVID. It was July 2020. My wife was pregnant with our second child. Now she works too, so like we could float it, right? But it was still, the job market sucked at that time, right?
Yeah, it was layoffs. It wasn't hiring.
Right. So I mean, I lucked out. I found a job, like a product owner job, at a digital lending company, which at the time I thought, well, this is terrible, and it's kind of long term. It worked out for me because it got me exposure to lending, and I understand that world a lot better now. But I stayed there for about 8 months. As I was looking for something to come back into the fraud
always looking for that next
space.
step. We got to get the paycheck in for now. Yeah.
Right. So stayed there for about 8 months. Went to WorldPay as a product manager in the merchant fraud space. And coming from a banking background, like the AML is very, very back office. Like I didn't really play much on the fraud side. I dabbled in it here and there, but coming into WorldPay, like they told me it was merchant fraud, and I was like, what is a merchant? Like it was honestly like the first time I'd ever heard the word merchant in that context, and I was like, well, I don't. Okay, whatever. And I, coming in, I thought it was just gonna be pretty much the same. It's the same data. It's just you're running different rules for it. Like what's the big deal, right? I thought it was just gonna be the same thing, and it's obviously entirely different, right? It's entirely different than AML. And even like between issuer and merchant, the amount of data and the integrations and everything are different as well. So
Yep.
it was
Some have enhanced auth data, some sending you the minimum, man.
right. So it was a great learning experience. Being at a large processor like that, like it's not their core competency, obviously. Right. I think it provides a very valuable service to many merchants.
Yeah.
And especially if you're already integrated with them, right? If you don't have the fraud, like a fraud team to do that kind of monitoring for your payments, and you're already integrated to your merchant, turning that on, while it's maybe not the best thing in the world,
Yeah.
it is a lot better than having nothing, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather hide behind a table if someone's shooting at me than stand out in the open.
I've had to use gateway fraud tools at multiple locations before because we just didn't have any other options, and
Mm-hmm.
like the tools aren't the best. And then, I think smaller companies usually are more known for using the merchant fraud services from their PSPs, just because like they just don't have like the capacity to staff somebody. Usually, like, as usually fraud people come from like customer service, that because
Yep.
that's where they start to roll into it, but having like being able to outsource that at the beginning, or even in the middle if you're broke, is something that's I think a lot of merchants do. But there's a reason that all PSPs have a fraud tool integrated at the gateway level. It's because like it's just sometimes it's the only option. Like I've had companies before where we use
Yeah.
custom checkout, and the only place we could ever have a fraud tool was in the exact same call to our gateway processor, and that was it. So I had to shove something in there, and thankfully at the time that company that processor did have something that we could use. But I mean,
Absolutely.
Adyen has Revenue Protect, like CyberSource has Decision Manager. Everybody's like, I think Chase still even has SafeTech somehow.
Right.
It
Yeah.
still
So this
exists.
was this
Yeah.
was WorldPay's fraud site. So that
Fraud
was that.
site.
And I also worked on, we stood up a partnership with Signified, which is a very well-known
Mm-hmm.
chargeback and I struggle with this word, indemnification.
Me too. Me too.
Um, yeah, I just kind of hard to get the tongue moving around that one.
Yeah. And then,
But
but you know what the problem is with that word too is when you're saying it and you're messing it up, you feel like it's a wrong word. Like
yeah,
is this a real word as it's coming out of your mouth? Like,
well, if you're speaking at a certain rate, you almost have to like pause and then slow your rate of speech down before you can say that. But anyway, chargeback indemnification was signified, and that product is live
boom.
now, called guaranteed payments. So that was really a great thing for them to stand up, because I mean, if you are integrated with a gateway already, and they're doing your card processing, and you can flip a switch and have a chargeback guarantee, versus how many people you got to hire, how many IT folks you got to cajole to work on your project to integrate to a provider that does as a standalone, right? So
So
it's a
so yeah, that's really interesting. I like the flip a switch thing, because I think a lot of these orchestration things are trying to like push towards
they are.
having that ability to flip a switch. But
Hmm.
we have built in a switch here at my company, based on like busy season, staffing levels, holidays, those sorts of things, that we can flip a switch to full automation versus like hybrid models, like switching between, is there going to be manual review today, this hour, this weekend? We can switch around and move around between that based on the needs, and it's been life changing for our business.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, and with this, it's as easy as call your. Now I feel almost like a shill for work right now, but yeah, call your account manager and say, hey, turn it on, and they submit a ticket and it gets turned on. It's very, very simple, but
WorldPay, I'm coming after you for sponsorships after this.
there you go. So I was there for, I think, a little over a year and a half, but towards the end of my tenure there, I was thinking like, you know, we were in a department called value added services, right? It's a value add. It's something you add on top of your processing, And like I said, it's not their core competency. It's a lot of partnership. A lot of the work that I was doing was on enablement and supporting sales. And I wanted to do something that was more building of my own. You know,
Got it.
we partnered with different vendors, but when we talk to merchants, it's like, well, we got problems with bots and we got problems with ATO, and it's like, well, we did some of that in various ways, but it wasn't all integrated really well. And I wanted to build something of my own somewhere else that I could say, we are using best in class vendors, best in class solutions to stop fraud. And I interviewed a couple of different places, but I saw this role for Carmax. It was for fraud technology, and it sounded very much like a product strategy type of role, which really fit my background. And interviewed for it, and just fell in love with the company. Like their mission of providing an iconic customer experience. Like they don't want to just make it a good experience for you. They want every customer to have a very good, like, iconic is something that goes many steps beyond that. So what can we do in the fraud space to support that? So my mission statement for what I'm building is to deploy intelligent solutions to detect, deter, and prevent fraud while supporting iconic customer experiences. Right. I want to do that so that it's not viewed as, well, this guy's going to come in here and put all these controls in and lock everything down. Like, that's absolutely not what we're doing. Absolutely not. So that message has resonated really well internally, and really excited about some of the stuff that we're going to be able to do over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so let's talk about Carmax, where you're at now, and let's get to the meat and bones of this podcast here. But Carmax, I think, is a pretty well-known company. I think, obviously, the idea of that motto of an iconic customer service or customer experience has been working, because the expansion for Carmax has been pretty significant. Like,
Yep.
it used to be, for me, when I first came across the brand, it was Southern California. It was a used car lot. People knew about it, but then now they're everywhere, and they're even up in Oregon. So that says a lot about the expansion. But I think pioneering, like, buying a car sucks. It really does.
It does.
It takes all day. You have to go, you have to sit there, you have to negotiate, and they always try to screw you, add things on. That's just why I started using brokers to buy my car. So they go do all that for me, and then the car just shows up in my driveway, and I sign like 5 pieces of paper, then off they go. But Carmax has kind of pioneered that experience where it's not crappy. It's, the price is what the price is, what the price is.
Yeah.
Here you go. Do you want to buy it? Yes or no? And then out the door you go, with your car, which I think is a lot. And I would, people always say, if you look on like Reddit, if you look on social media, like, why can't buying a car be like buying groceries? You go in, you pick out what you want, you pay for it, and then you leave. And Carmax seems to be trying to make that experience more like that, including being able to purchase a car online. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So Carmax started out of Circuit City, actually, in the early 90s.
Wait, no way. Really?
They did. Yeah. Yeah. So they were spun off from Circuit City. I don't know the full story. I'm not going to go read
That's
the Wikipedia
amazing.
page if you want the nitty gritty. But yeah, they came out of Circuit City in the early 90s. The first store was actually in Richmond, Virginia, which is where we're headquartered. So, your experiences, I saw them in SoCal all the time, but we actually started on the East Coast. And we today, I think, have 240 something stores across the US. So we are US based. So any international listeners here wouldn't maybe recognize the name, but we're US based, and the business model has always been used cars at a set price. And we also provide max care, which is the guarantee that is optional to purchase on that. So a lot of the
I let me tell you a quick story about Max Care. So I had Jenny that used to work for me at Ticketmaster. She's still there. She only buys her cars at Carmax. Like, that's her thing because of Max.
Thank you, Jenny.
And I used to give her so much crap about buying her cars at Carmax because I didn't know. I was ignorant of Max Care. But then on her car that she had a catastrophic failure.
Mm-hmm.
And she got that thing towed to Carmax, and they couldn't fix it at Carmax, but they gave her an approved shop outside of Carmax that they just paid for and took care of it. And like they literally made her whole so quickly and so easily. I retract my statement of anything bad I've ever said about Carmax, because that seems like a superb service
Yeah,
that
it absolutely
is
is.
so beneficial.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into the details of what exactly it would be because my PR department would probably say you're off on this. But yes, it is a very good warranty. I'll just keep it at that. It's a very good warranty that covers many
Doug
things.
DeMuro talks about it. You
Yes, and
can
I
go
was going
watch
to
the
bring
Doug
up Doug
DeMuro
DeMuro.
video.
So Doug DeMuro, that's actually how I came to know of CarMax was through his videos because part of Gawker Media back in the day was Jalopnik, and I've been a car guy my entire life. My dad used to race motorcycles, so I was brought up in that culture. And Jalopnik was one of those sites, and I would read that every single day. Doug DeMuro was one of the journalists on there that would write about his Range Rover that he bought from
Yeah.
CarMax.
Bumper to bumper, bro.
Bumper to bumper warranty, and I think the warrant he paid maybe $3,000 or $4,000 for this warranty, and I think it was 20 plus thousand.
Yeah.
We don't have you don't have your assistant to look these things up live for us yet,
I know. I gave him a
but
day off today. Yeah.
yeah, but it was quite a bit of money, and it was several years. I mean, it was like over a 4 or 5 year span that he utilized this warranty, and that's exactly what it's for, right? And obviously that's an outlier, and I can't say that Range Rover is the most reliable car, but you know
Hey, I
that.
have one of those, by the
Well,
way. I
but
do.
yeah, I mean, they're not all like that, right? So, or else we'd be out of business. But it normalizes with the volume we sell in those. But yeah, it's I don't know where we were going with that, but it is a great
Yeah.
warranty. And go ahead, maybe we'll cut this
Yeah, I mean,
little
we can leave it in, because I mean, we're talking about CarMax and what kind of sets it apart and part of the iconic customer experience. But as you guys have gained in popularity, um, from things like Doug DeMuro having those warranty videos, that has brought on, and I think probably especially since you've been there since it's COVID times that you've
Mhm,
joined, has obviously a lot of things have moved online, which
mhm.
has created whole new attack vectors for businesses that weren't quite ready for it.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that you guys weren't, so don't think that. I'm just saying overall businesses, everything was like, let's put everything online and then we'll see what happens. And things happened. So you guys, I think with buying cars, like there's like, when we were prepping for this episode, I talked about there's two things that require a little more intervention to buy than the average product. And it's cars and homes, because there
yeah,
has to be some sort of government intervention at some point. So you have to register the car, you have to do a record at the county for the sale of your home. So the process is a little more involved, and it requires a little more process to make it happen. Now, you guys allow people to purchase a car online,
we
correct?
do, we do, yes.
And with that comes all of the new stuff that's happening. And I think for this episode, like when we were kind of prepping on, I'm going to let you run through some of the things that you see that you normally like encounter on a day to day. But I think the bread and butter of this is more of the ACH style fraud that we were talking about kind of when we were prepping for this. And I'd love to talk about just all of the things that you're seeing, because these stories, when we were prepping this, were fascinating to me, and I'd love to share them with the audience. So
Sure.
could you talk about what you see and what you do?
I can. Yeah. You mentioned everything moving online during COVID, and that's the time that I was at WorldPay, right? Talking to all the merchants that had moved online during
So you're
COVID and
seeing
were,
what they're doing. Yeah. And then in
yeah,
trouble all of a sudden.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm seeing all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, like, why weren't you prepared for this? And after talking to many of them, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. You didn't have the resources, you didn't have this, that, and didn't plan on these things happening. They just got pushed, and you had to move online to support sales, to support customer experience, so on and so forth. So, when I came to CarMax, when I first looked at it, I was like, what kind of fraud can the auto industry have? Like, what could you possibly have? And I did some research beforehand, and like was like, oh, okay, yeah, this all makes sense. And um, payment fraud, as you mentioned, ACH fraud, is one of them. Synthetic identity and ID theft in general is another one. And then there's specific ones to different types of dealerships. But yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the ACH fraud, for example. So, if you're a dealer that accepts ACH payments, what kind of fraud do we see in ACH in general? Let's just say in general. across any kind of payments, right? We see people taking over accounts at financial institutions and moving the money or
Mhm.
making payments, somehow fraudulently gaining access to it and either getting goods or the funds from that account, right? The auto industry is no different. You know, if you're a car dealership that accepts ACH payments, you're susceptible to that as well. So
I
if
think I
someone,
think like yeah, like a lot of times like people have thought ACH payments are relatively low risk, no risk even, because it's the money's there. It's an ACH. Like you can't
yeah,
really reverse it, which you can. But yeah, I think that like historically people have thought about that. Like, and you see there's a big push now. There's even services that are offering checkout experiences via ACH
mm-hmm,
that people are really like they're touting as like low risk. Have your people pay that you get the money, no chargeback risk, those sorts of things. Because the whole time I'm thinking before you even mentioned the ACH part is like what kind of risk could a car company have? Like, you wouldn't charge back a car, would you? Well, I mean, yes, you kind of would, but in a different way.
yeah,
So
it's
so
really
go
interesting
on.
because
Yeah.
ACH,
Yeah.
there is real time ACH out there, right? But like most companies aren't doing real time ACH. So let's think of it from a card perspective. Like if you have a credit card, you can set up alerts on there. So as soon as it's swiped, you get a push notification to your phone, your watch, computer, every screen in your home can pop up and
Yeah.
say
It
someone
sucks.
used your card at this place for $500, right? And you can immediately go in on many bank apps and freeze the card, dispute the transaction, whatever, right? Well, with ACH, a lot of it is batch processing. So there might be a real-time
Gotta hit
call to
that
your bank.
clearinghouse.
Yeah, there might be a real-time call to your bank to confirm funds availability. So if I'm trying to make a $5,000 down payment, we might ping your bank and say, do they have $5,000 in the account? And they can say yes, and we'll say, all right, payment accepted. Right. Well, what happens if you walk outside and then shift the funds to a different account
Yeah. So it's
later
just
that
like
night on that?
auth and settlement in a credit card
Yeah,
world. Just
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you move those funds when the batch is run later that night to draw the funds out, they're gone. So that can happen. Um, so that's an NSF return, and like it's a struggle sometimes to see like, um, is this an NSF or is it fraud? Because if you're making that $5,000 down payment and you have $5,000 in your account, and we ping your account, they're gonna say, "Yep." But what happens? You use your debit card to stop at McDonald's on the way home, and now your balance is 49.85. Well, it's still going to come back as NSF when when the payment gets processed. So there's things like that. But yeah, the big one that the auto industry sees is people that truly take over an account. And I actually just gave a presentation on this a couple of days ago to the Auto Fraud Coalition at the IFCI about Telegram, social media sites, and other service websites where you can go out. I could give you the website and show it to you live, where you pick your bank that you want to steal from. It gives you the balance of the account and gives you a price. So you want an account with $100,000 balance, $3,500, right?
Jesus.
And this is not difficult to find. And this is what I've been educating people on internally within Carmax. And I'm trying to expand that to the auto industry. And what I post about a lot on LinkedIn as well is that it is not hard. There's the trope of the hacker in the hoodie that everyone thinks of when they think of cybercrime. And it's not that at all. I even said this in a post last night, like Diana Goshik Physic, who's I think been on your podcast before, said
Yeah.
like we should make a Netflix documentary about this. And I said, yeah, it should be called like Easy Money, the bright and shining face of modern identity fraud. Because it's so in your face, it's right there. It's your teenage kid could get on Telegram and be making hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash outs, and you would never know because it's so accessible. So if I'm a criminal, I can go buy a bank account with a high dollar balance for not a whole lot of money, go to your dealership, and if you accept ACH payments and aren't verifying that they own the account, which they can also put their name on the account, by the way, because
Yeah.
there's tools to help you with that as well. If they can do that, then they walk away with the car. Now, the problem with this is that the car then the problem is that the dealership is out the car. So they're out the inventory, and they have to pay the bank back because the bank says,
Yep.
hey, our
Double.
customer said that they didn't make this purchase. So they're out the inventory, they're out the money. And then they report it stolen.
That's what I
So
was
what
gonna
is
say.
the,
That's where I was going with this next. Is like,
yeah,
because it's a car, has to be. It's not like a phone, or it's not like a keyboard, or like a something like that, where like it's reported stolen because it has to be registered at DMV at some point. Like
right.
it has to be.
Well,
So that car
no,
exists.
it
But
does not have to be registered at DMV. So if you don't want to register it, you put it on a ship, probably in Houston, and you ship
oh,
it overseas. And I think what
just
I've
picking
seen
on
a lot of
Houston.
these, yeah, a lot of these end up in like Northern Africa.
Okay.
But they ship them overseas, and then who cares what happens to it then, right? If you have the network, and and I don't know if you've talked about this much on here, but I've heard webinars and others where we talk about how fraud is distributed. It's a supply chain of fraud. There's different people that play different roles, and it's so much of this is organized crime. It's just crazy, right? Because I have to have a network of people um, to obfuscate what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So I contact someone that has stolen the credentials of the account.
Yeah. That's the first
I
person.
That's the
Someone's got to
first
get
one,
them.
right? I use them, or maybe I bring in someone else to use them because I don't want to put my face in front of the
Yeah.
dealer. Or
Emily the criminal.
I pay them, yeah, I pay Emily to come in and pay her $500 to do this. She brings me the car. I call up my buddy at the chop shop who has the ability to make custom VIN stickers, and he revins it for me.
Yeah, I
And then I
saw the
call up,
Telegram thing that was like selling VINs and titles, right? Yeah.
yeah. And then I call up my guy on the inside of the DMV, and I said, hey, I need a title for this. And he does, I don't what he does, whatever he does to get me a clean title on it. And then I maybe sell that $100,000 car for 20, 30 grand. It's a
Jeez.
lot that goes into it, but it's a high payoff, right? You're not doing triangulation and having to manage like thousands of orders to make your money, right? Like you would during the holiday season or whenever. You're not buying $100 concert ticket or some supplements
Yeah.
to do that, right? It's a lot harder to fence that stuff. You got to do a lot higher volume
Yeah.
and a lot more, many more transactions to meet that threshold and make those funds back, right? This you only got to do it a couple times to get
And
a
everybody's
significant
getting
amount of money.
paid along the
Everyone's getting
way,
paid. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what the auto industry really sees from an ACH fraud perspective. Um, Another one that dealerships have seen, and this isn't I don't believe this is new, but this is something that's coming up more and more lately is um, some people call this artificial payoff. It's basically loan fraud where you would have a vehicle, like let's say you purchase a vehicle and you finance it. Let's say you finance 100 grand.
Yep.
You own the vehicle for a period of time. You either intend to defraud us immediately or you just are underwater and want to get rid of it. You could make a fraudulent payment on your loan and make it look like the balance of your loan is much lower than it is. And then you go either sell that car to a dealership or trade it in. And they think the payoff is 10,000 when in reality it's 100,000. So you walk out of there with a check or a new car and they're left like, well, I can't get the title to the car you sold us because the loan is not paid off now. So it's not a sophisticated not a
Yeah.
sophisticated fraud, but it's very manual on the dealership's control side to be able to detect something like that. So you got to look at things like payment history. Is the payment cleared? So is it a recent payment? Is it a lump sum? Did they make a bunch of payments beforehand? So we have actually been working with a lot of banks on this. I don't know really what it's going to take to solve that issue, but there's really no technology solution out there currently that can
So it
say
still has to be
for
manual.
certain, yeah, for certain, like this is the balance. Like there are solutions to say this is the payoff amount, but it's just based on what the bank is reporting. So if they're reporting as 10,000, it's really 100,000. There's nothing they can do. So there's no fraud aspect in that reporting. But I think there's through either consortium data, um, or maybe legislation,
Oh,
ultimately
wow.
holding some group responsible. I think you need to hold someone responsible for this. One group, right? It can't be a constant legal battle between both sides to say who's gonna, like, yeah, they sold it to us, but you told us it was lower than it is, so who pays who, right? Someone has
That's a
to be
good point.
responsible for that.
You used to see like a kind of a smaller form of this type of thing is what people would do fake ATM deposits before. When you used to have to put money in the envelope, they would say they do like an ATM deposit, would say it's $1,000 in there, you know,
Yeah.
boop, slip it in, they get $200 of, but there's nothing in there, or like a
Hmm.
buck in there. Then they would get, you know, $200 available balance right away. They go spend it right away that night, and then off they go. You know, like that was kind of like an old school way of doing a similar thing at a lot smaller scale. You know, but now that you have to
Yeah.
put the bills in and everything, and it reads it,
Yeah.
it's a little different.
I talked to I don't recall his name, but I talked to a guy who was like the head of the auto fraud task force in Houston. And I said, "What are you telling dealers to do about this?" He's like, "Don't pay them until you get the title."
But
Okay.
and that's the same thing. It's like what I mean. The events industry did the same thing, and now Etsy's doing the same thing. It's where like they won't pay out the resale of the tickets until after the event's played off, which I think is it's probably a smart move. But it used to be you paid them right away. So then you had this whole group of new people that were like, you know, 6 months, 8 months in a year out, sold their tickets, and they're just
Yeah.
waiting to get paid. They're out the money because they paid for the inventory initially, and then they can't get recouped their money from what they resold the inventory until for a year. And then same thing, like Etsy is like holding like up to like 75%. I think they're averaging 25% of people's payouts until the item has been delivered. And I think a time after that, it's probably the chargeback window after that has closed
Yeah.
out before
You
they
know,
pay them.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a good customer experience,
It
but
is
what else are
not.
you gonna do?
It is absolutely not. It's not iconic for sure.
It's
Right.
not a iconic.
If you watch any basketball game, you'll see Carmax on the court. Uh, because we do sponsor a lot of NBA and WNBA, and every commercial you'll see Steph Curry saying, "Hey, sell us your car." And I said, "Well, I can't, I can't have Steph saying, 'Hey, sell us your car,' and you walk away with a check, and you come into our dealership and we say, it's going to be a couple weeks,
Yeah, I'll
right?
give you a
It's
check in a
just,
couple of weeks.
yeah. So we've been actively working on this for a while now. I think we've got some really, really good controls in place that will deter people from doing so. But nothing is perfect, so we're constantly looking at what we can do to make things better, and working with our lending partners and the finance industry in general to come up with a holistic solution.
So before I ask you what you can tell me about what you're doing, any other cool stories from that Houston thing that you might be able to share? That sounds pretty interesting, actually.
No, no, it's funny. The auto industry is, I wouldn't say it's like super advanced from a technology standpoint, right? I've come from banking, and payments or fintech, and everything's like technology driven. And you want to meet with someone, you send them an invite for a Zoom or a Teams call, and you hop on, you talk. This guy, I I emailed him, and he emailed back and said, like, "Hey, here's my phone number. Just give me a call on Monday." And I was like, "Okay, well, here are some blocks in my calendar that I could call you. Are you available during any of these?" He's like, "Just call me now." He gets his cell phone number. He calls me. He's like, "Hey." I said, "Hey there." I said, "Is this so and so?" And he said, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm in the car with my daughter. We're driving to pick up my wife. What's going on?" So it was just like a total throwback to, it's like the old days. Like, just give me a call and tell me what's going on, and I'll give you the information. It was kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
But it's the auto industry, I think, from a technology perspective in general, is just kind of, is several years behind. And I heard there's another podcast, it's called Car Dealership Guy. So this he goes by CDG. He's an anonymous guy that works in the auto industry. I think he works like in a dealer group, but he produces podcasts, and he has all kinds of people on talking about wholesale auction and uh, EVs and all kinds of different stuff about the auto industry. It's really interesting. But he had someone on that was from a technology company, and she was saying basically like, the auto industry is 10 to 15 years behind. And I came from,
That's, I
I don't know,
mean,
she came from
yeah.
CPG or wherever, whatever industry she was in. And she's like, it was really, I just had to take a step back and assess where are we and what do we need to do to just bring us back up to where you would think of as normal at another place. So, uh, I kind of thought that as well coming into CarMax, because it was just, it was some older technology that we're working with. And then I met with some other folks in the industry and they're like, we don't have anything. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have anything? They're like, yeah, we're scanning, we're photocopying driver's licenses. Like, I'm like, what do you mean you're scanning them with some tool? No, we literally put them on a copier and we copy the driver's license. And that's all, that's all they did. They sent it to the lender and that's that. Right. So when I met with our lending partners, like, you are so far ahead of where every other dealer group is. It's insane. And when I pitched out my roadmap to them, like, this is what we're doing over the next couple of years, they're like, this is awesome. We love you. One of them asked me to come talk to that IFCI group the other day. She's like, your presentation was awesome. Come give it to all these other people. So we really are in good shape.
Good.
We're ahead of the vast majority of the industry. And I talked about my mission, but my vision is, in a couple of years, we will be the leader in this space. And I think we can be a leader, not just within auto lending, but within e-commerce in general with some of the tooling we're putting in.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, my mind, I'll obviously immediately goes to like IDV stuff and like where the state of the state is, but that's kind of a fragmented space right now. I put an episode out
Quite.
with Verif about that, but there's different levels of it. And then the different ways that those can be exploited as well is pretty well documented and pretty well known.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really just IDV all the things and then just expect that to be perfect and done, these days. So buying a car, then there's the you have to send data to DMV. You have to get the title from whoever has the title. There's just so many different pieces. Is it in a different state? Is it here? Where's this car coming from? It's just like I could see how there would be a lot that need to be sorted out. You have to kind of go one
Yeah.
element at a time and then find the ways, make sure that the toys can play together too.
We need to just be foundational in what we're doing, right? We have things here and there that work well, but as things go more and more online and we want to build a better omni-channel experience, we need to have these foundations. And a lot of the questions we're getting is like, what's the ROI of doing this or that? And it's like, well, you have to have something there first. It's like, they're thinking of ROI. Some people think of ROI as like, you have a house. I want to increase the size of the house by 30%. And I want to increase the value of it by X by doing paint and tile and this and that, right? Like, sometimes you just have like a tent in a field, right? You have a tent and maybe you have a camper over here. You're not always at the point where you can improve on what you have. You have to start foundational and build that house first and then build it out further.
That's an excellent analogy right there. I really like that. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I think that, it's hard. We always talk about it on this show, but it's hard to really justify or put dollars around some of the fraud stuff that we do. Like, yeah, we can lower chargebacks or we can increase approvals, and those are things, those are measurable KPIs that you can have. But swapping out one tool for another and what happens with like customer experience is a great example of something that's a little harder to measure. Like,
Yeah.
You let's say for you guys, you move everything online and you get this absolute certainty of who's purchasing the product, the car's being delivered, and you see people adopt that channel. Well, are they adopting it because it's so easy, or are they adopting it because more people are buying online? It's hard to measure who the
It certainly
root
is.
that lift actually belongs to. But I will
Yeah.
say, like, removing barriers for any business that ever listens to this, removing barriers to get to the product or making the way more seamless is always a good thing. Like I've said on a couple of these shows before, and even earlier in this, I'm buying a house right now. The fact that DocuSign and all these things are able to be done for me, so I haven't had to leave my house yet, is a huge shift from how I'm told buying used to be, where you had to go to your title company and sign documents again and again and again and again. When this is all said and done, I'm never going to have to leave my house in order to purchase this property. Like, even when I sign the official notarized documents, the notary comes to me to sign these documents. and off I go. The keys will be delivered to me. And that's an example of a shift that made it easier for me. And it's not, I'm not going with this company because that's what they do. It's just like, that's how the experience has been for me. But now that I know how it is with this company, I'm going to, the next time I need it, I'm going to buy it. But like, whose idea was it to do it this way? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's what we strive to do, is make that experience so good that you come back, right? If you have a great experience, an iconic experience, as we hope you do,
Iconic, yes.
and your coworker or friend Jenny certainly has, right? She's telling you about that, right? And she's telling other people about that. And if you have a bad experience, you're going to tell that many more people.
Yeah,
so,
like I just had with Lemonade, the insurance company, the other day. Yeah, now it's on my LinkedIn.
Yeah. So we want people to have those experiences, and we cannot do that. We cannot expand our online presence and do more, or do different things if we can't support it, right? If we can't support it securely and control our losses, then we won't be able to do that.
Well, this has been super fascinating so far. So let's talk about some of the things that you guys might be doing to help you solve these with technology to make it easier, so we can have that iconic experience. Because I'm not gonna lie, like I am starting, like I've got to finish this house thing, get settled in my payment, and then I am in the market for a new car. But the particular car that I want, the Mercedes GLE 450 4MATIC, I would prefer to buy one that's already depreciated by a year or two.
I'll check our inventory for you.
Yeah, please do, and see what we can do. Because that's the thing, is like, if I buy new, I'm at these interest rates, I'm all these things. I would probably like to prefer one that's down in interest. Hoovie put out a nice little video the other day talking about how luxury SUVs are declining in price a little bit. So I'm open to it, but that's the car that I want. And I want that the particular model year. I think it's 2022 now, because it has the technology that I like, and it looks sexy AF, as they say. But what are you guys doing to make this experience, like, from a technology standpoint, more iconic for us? Like, can you kind of dive in a little bit about that?
Well, I can't talk about specifics, what Carmax doing, but I think if I talk more generally about
what should the industry
identity
do
verification,
to make it more iconic?
When I think about identity verification, one, I think it's a mess. I'll just say that. I think it's a mess.
Okay.
IDV, there are so many different IDV companies that have the same core product of take a picture of your license, take a selfie, we'll match it. And they all tell you they're the best. And how do you judge them, right? Because I can't legally go online or anywhere and buy a bunch of fake IDs to actually test this out, right? I can only test it out with me and my coworkers. Then maybe they bring some fake IDs on site and say, look, they don't work. Well, yeah, you're not going to bring ones that do. So it's difficult. I think, in general, the finance industry and anyone that needs to do identity verification, for business purposes, needs to go beyond looking at the driver's license or the passport or whatever document they're looking at. They need to go way beyond that, starting at like the beginning of the customer journey. When they onboard with you, what information are they providing you? Are they giving you a good email address? Are they giving you a good phone number? Is the name a name, or is it just a bunch of letters and numbers that they typed in like they got angry at their keyboard, right? Looking at risk holistically across the customer journey is the only way that you can truly understand a person, right? Looking at device, phone, email, behavior, looking at all those things is how we are going to today be able to identity proof someone. I think in the future, you're probably going to be looking at Apple and or Google to have some sort of tokenized identity on those devices.
Thank you. Someone's been listening to my show.
Did you say that? That is like my firm belief is that has to happen. There's no way we get to it without.
I've been running around for years saying, and I was going to try and make it, but I feel like with passkeys, it's kind of not worth it for me to try and make it. I was going to try and make it, but an identity token, that's your token. And it's biometrically authenticated. So that anytime a business encounters that biometric token, they know for certain that person in that session is actually validated, known, really that human being. So how you do that is it was kind of give you the trick, because you have to offload some sort of biometric authentication, whether like and Apple, controls it with like Touch ID, Face ID, Google, Samsung have their things. But basically at the moment that identity is authenticated, that token is like a forever token, just like we have payment tokens, but it's for you. That's your token. It's basically your digital ID. So if I go onto Carmax and I pass this token, you have for certain known that it's me, biometrically authenticated, actually me in that session trying to make that purchase. You can look at like the ACHs and make sure all those things line up to that actual token and see it's the right person. But same thing, if I go in and authenticate this ACH with that same token, then that money's really the money. The problem is that there still needs to be liability legalities worked out that says, if there is ever a conflict that arises from this token, who's really responsible for it? And the answer is the owner of the token is what it needs to be. There needs to be some punishment to the person. And that's where everybody starts to freak out, because what if it does get compromised? Just like
what if you cut my hand off and take my hand to the bank and scan my fingers?
I mean, I probably don't care about the 50 grand that I just spent on, a Kia Telluride.
I don't have all the answers. I certainly think that there there obviously needs to be a lot of innovation in this space.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, one of the problems is the fragmentation of IDV. There's just so many, there are certain, like, I'm not going to name names because we all know who they are. There are certain ones that put together mobile wallets, or, have your X verified identity, right? And they're trying to sell it to everyone. They put it on different social media sites that you can verify yourself on. And they think they can build a plurality of enough people to become the standard of identity, right? I just don't think that there are enough people yet that are willing to sign on to that. It's not it's not as trustworthy as it needs to be. So you need to, back to your original question, was you need to look at the entire customer journey. You have to know what people are doing. I know one of your sponsors does journey time orchestration. That's what they look at, right? So if you're able to identify someone and say that this is a good person, and there's others that look at like how you're holding your phone. Like you had someone on from Lexus talking about behavioral biometrics. There's a lot of folks that do that as well. There's plenty of things out there that look at people's behavior, whether it's their actual biometric behavior of interacting and moving with their device, or it is the rate at which they are interacting with your website. So, or is someone registering, looking for a specific item, adding it to a cart and doing Apple Pay checkout immediately? Well, that's probably odd, right? I'm not going to a site for the first time and doing those things. But if you don't have the visibility into that, how do you know if it's odd?
So
right,
let's talk about that. So yes, so this is kind of in the part of that. So I think, like the how you hold the phone, all those. So there was, first of all, we started with device ID. That was like our first wave of stuff. This is like 10 years ago, Then we moved into like these more behavioral sorts of things over the last few years. We did, this is the order. When it went device ID, it went the identity verification services first, with like the Ikatas and those types, pinging the information, validating information behind the scenes. Then it went into more of the IDV stuff with the credit cards and all that. Turn your head sideways, or started with hold up a picture. And I saw one time we used one where somebody literally drew a stick figure and held it up, and the IDV company validated it to the ID, just saying that happens. Everybody think about that. Then we went into this more like the identification stuff, but then the behavioral biometrics. How are they holding their phone? How are they walking? Like, what is the speed that they're going? But then the journey time orchestration stuff is now kind of pulling all of that information, so you can pull and do step up authentications automatically to those the IDVs, to the address verifications, to the device IDs, whatever you need, they can do for you, and at different points in the thing. But I think the next wave is going to kind of be like these identity tokens. It's going to be the passkeys.
I knew you were going to.
It's going there, but there's still more. It's passkeys are going to be the next wave. I think Google, kind of just they did what they needed to do by pushing everybody to do it. But at the same time, there are passkey providers in this this place. There's companies like Signal, who's been on my show before, Intersect, who's been on my show, where they will create a passkey for you. And it's the same thing like you were just talking about, where there are these companies like the IDV companies set up the stuff, and they're like, then they try to sell it, be like, look, anybody, they're in our network already. If they come on and they do it, we know it's them, and the passkeys are trying to do the same thing. And there's going to be a fragmentation of passkeys too. But I think Google's kind of preemptively striking by with their sign in with Google that you can sign in with the passkeys, but it kind of does put it in their network too. So you kind of get married to Google. Like I pay for this podcast, I pay for the Google Pro, business account that I have to pay for. And my passkeys are kind of tied to that business pro account. And I have to do that forever, but I think at the same time, like you look at these journey time orchestrations, and passkeys will play into those as well. The same providers is you can then prompt people for a passkey authentication. Like let's say they log in, they somehow got in, and then they went straight to the customer details page. As we all know, that's not what people really do. So then you can passkey there. And one of the cool things that I
change my password every time I log in.
Every single time? Do you really?
Every single time. No.
No. I thought you were being serious for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. I know that that's a sign of fraud.
I'm a normal user. I sign in and change my password.
But you got to remember, every time. Our security lives are a lot different than other people. So like maybe you were like really doing it. I'm like, normally I flag that and I put a prompt up on that. But with customer journey time orchestration, one of the cool things that you can do, and not just saying this because Spec is a great sponsor of mine, but in the step back looking, like my company, we fire up new marketing channels, new checkout flows all the time. It's just the nature of the business.
Sure.
But if we have something that's like an orchestrator, we can drop these things right on that, on these new processes or these new things that come up. And one of the things, like you just said, add something to a cart, check out real quick as a new customer with Apple Pay. Well, there's these things called app clips that you can put a QR code on a wall, like in a mall, and somebody can scan that QR code, which don't do that, people. Come on, stop scanning random shit. but it brings up like a direct product, like it's an individual product on our site, like these vitamin C's for the sale that we're doing. And then you can immediately, you don't even load an app, you don't load anything. It's like in line in that little screen share thing, or that the QR code scanner, check out with Apple Pay right then and there. And it happens in seconds, like the idea is to get these people through these funnels.
Sure.
And these things are like less than 10 megabytes, so we have to do it. But at the same time, like we have to find ways to put our fraud tools on those in the confines of, well, it has to be less than 10 megabytes total space. Well, the average library for a SDK on a fraud tool is like 1.1 megabytes. Well, what is the rest of your company trying to add in there, But doing orchestration stuff, if it's passing through some sort of server through you, eventually you could kind of grab it there and then do it, offload the size of it. So yeah, there's a lot in there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, it is great, right? I mean, the data is one aspect of it, but you have to be able to get to the data. And if you don't have something that you can easily plug in, it's very easy to miss things. So yeah.
How'd you know I was going there with passkeys?
I've listened to an episode or two.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Give me them view counts.
Exactly. But I think it really is looking at the whole customer journey and understanding like what your customers normally do, what specific customers do, and scoring, like risk scoring the data that they pass through your network. It's behavior and it's the data.
We used to do that with validations at an old company I worked at. Is every piece of data that you provided that we could authenticate, you got scored. You got more positive score, So if we can validate your email, well, we all know if they're fetching a fake email, if it's ATO, they probably got the email ATO too. Phone number, social media logins. We would count social media logins. The more that you were able to validate, the more score you got. Now you could do passkeys, you could do additional things, so you could kind of have an idea earlier in the process, earlier in this journey, if it's a known good customer, so you don't have to do as much later, and you can have more confidence. Because it took so long, we've always just loaded our entire payload of fraud stuff right at checkout, and that's exactly, there's other places we can do it.
Yeah. We have the luxury of getting much more data than you typically would, like on an e-commerce site, just checking out, because we're not only asking for phone, email, and address for shipping, we ask for your social security number. You get,
you get actual like Homeland Security identity data about people.
Right. And we're asking for, employment information, income information, so we can prove your credit worthiness as well. So, a lot of the fraud and credit risk stuff that we have can work in tandem. Yeah, I think what's interesting is that I didn't think about coming in was like there's so many different types of fraud and different ways that you can commit fraud. And like if you're coming from the e-com side, you think like there's payment fraud, there's ATO, there's stored value, there's rewards points, there's all these different things, but it all comes down to someone coming in and getting something with someone else's card, points, credentials, whatever, right? When you move into the lending space, well, let's say I make $100,000 a year, and the lender asks me how much I make, and I say, well, 250. What the hell? They might give me a better interest rate than they would if I put my actual income. Income verification is a huge thing for the lending space, right? So I put 100, let's say I go through a pre-qual or a pre-approval application and I put 100,000, right? And they say, all right, 4 years, 12% interest, because interest rates are insane now. And they say, let me go back and say I'm going to make a $15,000 down payment. I make what the hell, $250,000, and it comes back and says 9%. Well, they're using their own identity, but they're misrepresenting their income. So is it fraud? Is it something else?
Interesting. That's a really interesting question.
Technically, I mean, I guess it's how and how you define fraud. To me, like fraud is simply misrepresentation with the intent of some kind of gain. And the gain in this case is a lower interest rate. So if I'm charging you 12%, I'm going to make, let's say it's a $100,000 car, I make $112,000 in the loan versus 9%, I make 109. So it's lost interest income to the company versus fraud. It's kind of a gray area, but either way, like it's also an increased credit risk as well. Because if you're buying that expensive car, if you make 250, you're probably more likely to be current on the payments than if you make significantly less than that. So we need to look at from a overall risk perspective. So it could, if you make 100,000, maybe we won't give you any kind of offer on it. You need to make way more to get it. Sense. So yeah, we see that kind of fraud all the time.
That's super fascinating. I never really thought about that. My bank does ask me like every 6 months how much I make because my bonuses are kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Or like employers. We see. So if you ever, next time you do an auto loan, you might get what's called in the auto industry, it's called a stip. It's just a stipulation. So we stipulate that you must provide X, Y, and Z in order for us to continue with this deal. So we might stipulate that you have to provide proof of income, proof of residency, proof of employment. Fake stips are incredibly common, and it's probably in any lending that I'm sure you have to provide like tax returns and various other things for your mortgage as well. So people will print off
for multiple years.
Yeah, right. Fake pay stubs are huge. They're rarely successful because people don't know how to do math. So you make $5,000 in this pay period. You had 3,000 in deductions, but your net pay was $4,000. Well, the math ain't math, and we're not accepting this, right? So they'll do that. They'll make up fake employers. There are real fake employers that will, for a service, answer the phone and say, yes, you work there and you make $50,000 a year. So we see those kinds of things, but it's really any way that you could possibly think of, and many others, to commit fraud against the lending or auto industry. It will happen.
That's super fascinating. I never would have thought about those sorts of things, so this is why I wanted to have this conversation where we just talk about the industry and some of the weird stuff that you guys see specifically. We can talk about karting all day long, but I think I have plenty. I got 30 some episodes about that, Wow, this has been a super interesting conversation, and I would like to thank you for coming on and sharing these stories. I'm going to need you to come back and tell me even more. And I'd really like to, definitely, as you guys go through this process, as you modernize this flow for Carmax, I'd love to have you share with us some of the the outcomes. It doesn't have to be specifics. Obviously, we don't want to give away Carmax secrets here. You know, Carvana does listen, but I would like to just know what the fruits of it is for a larger audience to know, like options that might work for them. You know, especially because we do have like people that are in this lending space that are extending credit to people like that. And I would like to make sure that like mortgage people hear about this, like these sorts of things too, so they can make it even easier in the future.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There's an industry that could use some overall.
absolutely. I know there's people trying, but like, it's just like,
A
they
lot of
have to
work
be
there.
ready for the disruption, you know, like
Certainly.
I was always saying like, why can't I just give you guys the money? We sign this contract. You give me the difference, and then we just go. Like, why can't we do that? Why do I need 5,000 different pages of things? But as I've going through the process for the second time this year, because I pulled an offer earlier this summer, I understand it a little more now. But there's got to be a way we can automate all of this, you know.
There's a little bit of risk when you're lending someone $1 million, you know.
Yeah, just a little bit here and there, but you know, hey, I was able to get it under 1 million by like $1 on my actual mortgage. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it has massive tax implications too on the writing off the mortgage interest. So,
oh,
yeah, so I'm gonna be okay.
There you go, smart move.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thanks for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to visit our incredible friends and sponsor, Spec. Get your holiday team ready with full visibility into the customer journey all season long using their patented no-code orchestration platform, and be ready for whatever comes your way with the ability to collect data, call third-party APIs, build logic and workflows, all with the ability to take action anywhere in the entire customer journey. Visit www.specprotected.com to schedule your demo and learn more. Thank you.